funny thing about life-changing moments is that they rarely announce themselves. There's no dramatic music playing in the background, no slow motion sequence to warn you that everything is about to change. For me, it happened on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, standing in my kitchen with a pregnancy test in my trembling hands. 2 pink lines, clear as day. I was 23 years old, newly married to Daniel, and halfway through my physical therapy degree. We'd been so careful, but apparently not careful enough. As I stood there staring at those lines, I felt my carefully planned future begin to slip through my fingers like sand. If you had asked me back then if I was ready to be a mother, I would have laughed. My own childhood had been complicated. My mother died when I was 12, leaving me with a father who buried his grief in work, and a brother, Rick, who was too young to understand why Mommy wasn't coming home. I basically raised myself through my teen years, and then helped raise Rick too. By the time I met Daniel in college, I was determined to build a life that was entirely my own. But life had other plans. 9 months later, I gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. We named them Ethan and Emma. They were beautiful, perfect, and completely overwhelming. I took a semester off from school, which turned into a year, which eventually turned into an indefinite pause on my education. It's just temporary, Daniel assured me as I packed away my textbooks. Once they're a little older, you can go back. I nodded, trying to believe him, but deep down, I knew the truth. Our finances were stretched thin with 2 bobbies. Daniel had just started his career in finance, and someone needed to stay home. That someone was me. The first few years were a blur of diapers, sleepless nights, and endless crying. Sometimes the bobbies, sometimes me. I'd watch Daniel put on his suit each morning, heading out to the adult world, while I stayed behind in a house that increasingly felt like both a sanctuary and a prison. Don't get me wrong, I loved my children fiercely. When Ethan took his first steps toward me, his chubby legs wobbling as he crossed the living room, I felt a joy so pure it brought tears to my eyes. When Emma said "Mama" for the first time, her tiny voice filled with such certainty, I felt chosen in a way I never had before. But there were also moments in the shower, in the rare quiet of nap time, in the darkness, as I fed a baby at 3 a.m., when I allowed myself to mourn the life I had planned, the career I would have had, the independence I had lost. By the time the twins were 4, my dream of returning to school had faded to a distant memory. Daniel's career was taking off, requiring longer hours and occasional travel. My days revolved entirely around playgroups, preschool pickups, and making sure dinner was on the table when Daniel got home. Then I found out I was pregnant again. The middle years. Our 3rd child, Lily, was born just after the twins turned 5. She was unexpected, but loved immediately, especially by Emma, who had been begging for a sister. With 3 children under 6, any lingering thoughts of returning to my education completely vanished. Daniel's company relocated us to a different city when the twins were 8. The move meant a promotion for him, a bigger house for us, and leaving behind the few friends I'd managed to make as a young mother. In our new neighborhood, I was Daniel's wife, or the twins' mom, or Lily's mom. Rarely just Sarah. The years passed in a parade of school projects, soccer practices, dance recitals, and birthday parties. I threw myself into motherhood with the same determination I once reserved for my studies. If I couldn't be a physical therapist, I would be the best damn mother these kids could ask for. And I was good at it. Ethan struggled with reading, so I spent hours researching techniques to help him. By 5th grade, he was reading above grade level. Emma was painfully shy, so I volunteered at her school, creating opportunities for her to build confidence. Lily showed an early talent for music, so I found a way to squeeze piano lessons into our tight budget. Meanwhile, Daniel climbed the corporate ladder. His absences grew longer, his presence at home more distracted when he was there. We were no longer the young, passionate couple who got pregnant too soon. We were co-managers of a household, passing like ships in the night. One evening, after the kids were in bed, Daniel mentioned a colleague who had just completed her MBA while raising 2 children. You could do something like that, he suggested casually, not looking up from his laptop. Now that the kids are older, I stared at him, suddenly furious. Did he think it was that easy? That I could just pick up where I left off 15 years ago? That the years of putting everyone else first hadn't changed me fundamentally? I'm 40 years old, Daniel, I said quietly. The woman I was, the dreams I had, they're gone. He finally looked up, surprised by the emotion in my voice. Sarah. It's fine, I cut him off, not wanting his pity. I chose this for them, and I had. Every day, with every school lunch packed and every scraped knee bandaged, I had chosen my children over myself. I didn't regret it, not really. But that didn't mean it didn't hurt sometimes. The real troubles began when the twins turned 18. They were heading to college, Ethan to state on a baseball scholarship, Emma to a prestigious art school across the country. I had always known this day would come, had prepared for it emotionally for years, but nothing could have readied me for the actual moment. The night before Emma left, I found myself in her bedroom doorway, watching her pack. Her suitcases were open on the bed, filled with the life she was taking with her. The walls, once covered with posters and photos, were now bare, leaving behind faint rectangles where the paint hadn't faded. Need any help? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Emma glanced up, then back down at her folding. I'm good, Mom, thanks. I lingered anyway, memorizing the curve of her cheek, the way her hair fell across her forehead, just like mine had at her age. You know, I started, when you were little, you used to beg me to help you pack for sleepovers. You were so worried you'd forget something important. She smiled faintly. I remember. And now you're packing to go across the country. Mom, she sighed, putting down the shirt she was folding. Please don't get emotional. We've talked about this. I need to do this on my own. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Of course. I'm going to miss you, that's all. I'll miss you too, she said, but her tone was distracted, already focused on her future. A future that didn't include me in the day-to-day. The next morning, Daniel drove Emma to the airport while I stayed behind with Ethan, helping him load his car. He was driving to state with a friend, starting his college journey with a road trip. As I hugged him goodbye, I felt a piece of my heart break away. Text me when you get there, I said, straightening his collar out of habit. Mom, he groaned, pulling away. I'll be fine. I know you will. I stepped back, forcing a smile. I'm proud of you, Ethan. He nodded, awkward in the face of my emotion, then got in the car and drove away without looking back. Just like that, my house was emptier by 2. Only Lily remained, and at 13, she was already pushing for more independence, spending more time with friends than at home. That night, I sat alone in the kitchen, surrounded by the silence of a home half empty. Daniel was still at the office, as usual. I poured myself a glass of wine and opened my laptop. Before I could overthink it, I searched for information about returning to school, about whether my old credits would still count, about what it would take to finally become the physical therapist I had once dreamed of being. The results were overwhelming. So much had changed in the field since I'd left school. New techniques, new research, new requirements. I would essentially be starting from scratch, competing with students half my age. I closed the laptop and finished my wine, feeling the weight of 20 years pressing down on me. What was I thinking? This wasn't a movie where the middle-aged mom triumphantly returns to fulfill her youthful dreams. This was real life, and in real life, some chances don't come around again. 3 years later, Emma called with news that both thrilled and terrified me. She was engaged. Her boyfriend Ryan had proposed during their post-graduation trip to Europe. They wanted a spring wedding, just 6 months away. That's soon, I said carefully. We don't want to wait, Emma replied, her voice bright with happiness. And we don't want anything too elaborate, just something small and meaningful. I immediately switched into planning mode, my mind racing with venues and flowers and guest lists. I can start looking at places here. The botanical garden where your father and I got married might be. Actually, Mom, Emma interrupted. We're planning to have the wedding in Ryan's hometown. His parents have offered to host it at their lake house. Oh, the single syllable felt inadequate to express my disappointment. I see. You'll still be involved, she assured me, but I could hear the hesitation in her voice. Just, maybe not with the day-to-day planning. Ryan's mom is really excited about helping, and since we'll be there anyway. After we hung up, I sat with the phone in my hand, trying to process what had just happened. My daughter was getting married, and I was being gently sidelined from the process. It felt like another loss, another piece of my identity slipping away. Over the next few months, I tried to be involved from a distance. I sent Emma links to dresses I thought she might like. I offered to go dress shopping with her when she came home for Thanksgiving. I asked about colors and themes and flowers. Each time, her responses grew more strained, more distant. Thanks, but we've already decided on something else. Or that's not really the vibe we're going for. Or, most painfully, Ryan's mom found the perfect dress for me. By Christmas, when the twins were home for the holidays, the tension was palpable. Emma spent most of her time on the phone with Ryan or his mother, discussing wedding details in hushed tones. When she did talk about the wedding with me, it was always with a preemptive wince, as if expecting my input to be unwelcome. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, Emma came into the kitchen, her expression serious. "Mom, can we talk?" I wiped my hands on a towel, my stomach immediately tightening. "Of course, sweetheart." She sat at the kitchen island, fidgeting with a napkin. "It's about the wedding." "What about it?" "Ryan and I and his parents, we've been talking." She took a deep breath. "We think it might be best if you weren't as involved in the ceremony as we originally planned." I blinked, not comprehending. "What do you mean?" "You get emotional, Mom. Really emotional. Like at my graduation and when I moved, and even just talking about wedding plans." She couldn't meet my eyes. "We want the day to be calm, happy, not dramatic." The words hit me like physical blows. "Not dramatic. Emma, I'm your mother. Of course I'm emotional about my daughter getting married. See, this is what I mean." She gestured at my face, where I could feel tears forming. "You're already crying and we're just talking about it. Ryan's family isn't like that. They're more reserved. So I'm supposed to what? Pretend I don't have feelings about my only daughter getting married. No, just maybe tone it down for one day." She looked miserable but determined. "It's our wedding, Mom. We want it to be perfect." I turned away, gripping the edge of the counter. "And I'm what's standing in the way of perfect." "That's not what I said." Emma stood up, frustration evident in her voice. "Why do you always have to make everything so intense?" The conversation deteriorated from there. Words were said that couldn't be taken back. By the time Daniel came home, Emma had retreated to her old bedroom, and I was aggressively chopping vegetables, tears streaming down my face. "What happened?" he asked, setting down his briefcase. I told him, my voice shaking with hurt and anger. To my surprise, he didn't immediately take my side. "Sarah," he said carefully, "you do get very emotional. Maybe Emma has a point." I stared at him, betrayed. "A point about what?" "About wanting her mother to act like an emotionless robot at her wedding." "That's not what she's asking." He loosened his tie, looking tired. "She's just asking you to dial it back a bit." "I cannot believe you're taking her side on this." I'm not taking sides. I'm trying to help you see her perspective. This is her day, Sarah. I threw the knife into the sink with a clatter. And I'm her mother. Every day of her life has been my day. Every skinned knee, every bad dream, every heartbreak, I was there for all of it. Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair, now more gray than brown. This isn't about you. 5 words. 5 simple words that cut to the bone because they were true. It wasn't about me. It had never been about me. For 21 years, my life had revolved around my children's needs, my children's dreams, my children's futures. And now that they were building lives that didn't center me, I was lost. The next morning, Emma left early to meet friends, barely saying goodbye. A week later, she returned to Ryan's hometown, and things remained tense between us. We communicated mostly through text messages, stiff and formal, about wedding logistics. Then, 2 months before the wedding, I received an email from Emma. Not a call, not a text, an email. Mom, it began. After a lot of thought and discussion with Ryan and his family, we've decided it would be best if you attended the wedding as a guest, rather than participating in the ceremony or preparations. We both feel this will make the day more relaxed and enjoyable for everyone involved. I hope you can understand and respect our decision. I read it 3 times, certain I was misunderstanding. But the message was clear. I was being demoted from mother of the bride to just another guest. No special dress, no walking down the aisle, no mother-daughter dance, no speech. Nothing to indicate that I was anything more than a casual acquaintance to the bride. When I called Emma, my voice shaking, she sounded defensive and distant. It's not a big deal, Mom. Ryan's mom is handling everything. You can just come and enjoy yourself without any pressure. Not a big deal, I repeated, incredulous. You're cutting me out of your wedding, and it's not a big deal. This is exactly why we made this decision, she said, her voice hardening. You're making it all about your feelings instead of what we want for our day. Because I have feelings, Emma. I'm not a robot. Well, maybe for once you could try to control those feelings instead of letting them control every situation. The call ended badly, with Emma threatening to uninvite me entirely if I couldn't get it together. I spent the rest of the day in bed, alternating between sobbing and staring numbly at the ceiling. When Daniel came home, he found me there, still in my pajamas despite it being well past dinner time. Emma called me, he said, sitting on the edge of the bed. She told me what happened. I didn't respond, didn't look at him. Sarah, he sighed, you need to let this go. It's her wedding. She's ashamed of me, I whispered. Our daughter is ashamed of her mother because I have the audacity to care. She's not ashamed. She's just different from you. He placed a hand on my shoulder. Not everyone expresses emotions the way you do. And maybe you do go overboard sometimes. I sat up then, anger replacing my despair. So that's it. Everyone else gets to decide how I should feel, how I should act. After everything I've given up for this family, I'm supposed to just shrink myself down to make everyone comfortable. Daniel stood up, his expression closing off. I'm not having this argument again. Either you accept Emma's decision, or you risk losing your relationship with her entirely. It's that simple. But it wasn't simple. Nothing about motherhood had ever been simple. The reckoning, the weeks leading up to the wedding, were some of the darkest of my life. I went through the motions, grocery shopping, cooking dinner, taking Lily to her activities. But inside, I was hollow. The daughter I had raised, had sacrificed everything for, had decided I was too much, too emotional to me. Ethan called occasionally, usually to talk about baseball or his classes, rarely mentioning the wedding drama. But one night, he surprised me. "Mom," he said suddenly, in the middle of telling me about a game, "I think Emma's being really unfair to you." I sat down, unprepared for his support. "You do?" "Yeah, I mean, you can be intense sometimes, but you're our mom. That's kind of your job." He paused. "Ryan's family, they're nice and all, but they're super uptight. Like robot people. I guess Emma thinks that's normal now." I smiled weakly, touched by his loyalty. "Thank you for saying that, honey. I told her she was being a jerk, but you know Emma. Once she decides something." After we hung up, I sat for a long time thinking. Maybe I had been too emotional, too overbearing. But wasn't that better than the alternative? Than being the kind of parent who didn't care enough? The night before we were set to drive to Ryan's hometown for the wedding, Daniel found me in our bedroom, staring at the mother of the bride dress I had bought months ago, before everything fell apart. It was still hanging in its garment bag, unworn. "You should still wear it," he said quietly. I shook my head. "Emma made it clear, I'm just a guest." "Sarah," he hesitated, then sat beside me on the bed. "I know this has been hard for you, and maybe I haven't been as understanding as I should have been." I looked at him, surprised by the admission. "You gave up everything for our family," he continued. "Your career, your dreams. And you did it without complaint for so many years. I think I took that for granted." "We both made choices," I said, though his words soothed something raw within me. "Yes, but your choices cost you more." He took my hand. "I'm sorry if I haven't appreciated that enough. The wedding weekend was a blur of forced smiles and careful distance. Emma was radiant, of course, but we hardly spoke beyond polite pleasantries." I sat in the third row during the ceremony, next to Daniel and Lily, watching as Ryan's mother performed all the traditional mother of the bride duties. At the reception, I danced with Daniel and chatted with distant relatives, always conscious of Emma's eyes on me, as if waiting for me to cause a scene. I didn't. I kept my emotions carefully contained, locked behind a pleasant smile that never quite reached my eyes. It was Lily, now 16 and surprisingly perceptive, who found me hiding in the bathroom. finally allowing myself a moment of grief. Mom, she pushed open the stall door I'd forgotten to lock. Are you okay? I hastily wiped my eyes. I'm fine, sweetie, just taking a breather. She didn't believe me, of course. She sat on the counter, legs swinging, studying me with eyes too wise for her age. Emma's being stupid, she declared. And so is Dad, kind of. I had to smile at her bluntness. It's complicated, Lily. No, it's not. You're her mom. You're allowed to be happy or sad or whatever at her wedding. She hopped down and hugged me fiercely. I won't ever be like that when I get married. I promise. I hugged her back, treasuring the moment. Well, let's not worry about your wedding just yet. You've got plenty of time. We returned to the reception together, my heart a little lighter. The evening continued, and finally, it was time for the father-daughter dance. I watched Daniel lead Emma onto the floor, both of them smiling, and felt a pang of something between sadness and acceptance. Then, as the dance ended, Emma's eyes found mine across the room. For a moment, we just looked at each other, a gulf of misunderstanding between us. Then, slowly, she made her way toward me. Mom, she said, her voice soft but steady. Would you like to dance? I nodded, not trusting myself to speak without my voice breaking. She led me to the dance floor as a new song began, something slow and sweet. As we swayed together, I was acutely aware of every eye on us, especially Ryan's family. I'm sorry, Emma whispered suddenly, her composure cracking slightly. I know I hurt you. It's okay, I lied. No, it's not. She pulled back to look at me. I was so focused on having the perfect wedding that I forgot what really matters. Ryan's mom, she's great, but she's not you. The tears I'd been holding back all day threatened to spill over. Emma, you don't have to. Yes, I do. She squeezed my hand. You've always been there for me, even when I didn't appreciate it. Especially when I didn't appreciate it. And I was wrong to push you away. We continued dancing, both of us fighting tears, both of us failing. By the end of the song, we were holding each other tightly, years of tension dissolving in a moment of raw, honest emotion. The exact kind of emotion I had been asked to suppress. The irony wasn't lost on me. The new beginning. After the wedding, something shifted between Emma and me. The distance remained. She was, after all, building her own life across the country, but the hostility had faded. Our phone calls became more frequent, more genuine. She even started asking for my advice again, a small but significant olive branch. Meanwhile, I was facing my own crossroads. Lily would be heading to college in just 2 years, and then what? Who would I be when I was no longer actively mothering? One evening, I found myself back on the computer, looking at local colleges. This time, instead of feeling overwhelmed by what had changed, I allowed myself to be excited by the possibilities. Maybe I couldn't become exactly who I had planned to be at 23, but that didn't mean I couldn't become someone new at 45. I started small, one class at the community college, just to see if my brain still worked for academics. It did. Then another class, and another. I wasn't pursuing physical therapy anymore. That dream had evolved. Now I was interested in counseling, specifically family counseling. My own experiences, the good and the bad, had given me insights I wanted to share. Daniel was supportive, if somewhat bemused by my sudden enthusiasm. "I haven't seen you this excited in years," he commented one night as I studied at the kitchen table. "I haven't been this excited in years," I admitted. I forgot what it feels like to do something just for me. He nodded slowly. "I'm sorry about that. I should have encouraged you more." "It wasn't your responsibility," I said, surprising myself with the realization as I spoke it. It was mine. I chose to put myself last for so long that I forgot I could choose differently. 2 years later, as I sat in the audience watching Lily graduate from high school, I felt a profound sense of both completion and beginning. My youngest was moving on, and so was I. I had just been accepted into a master's program in counseling. Emma was seated beside me, home for Lily's graduation. She leaned over as the ceremony ended, whispering, "Are you going to cry, Mom?" "Probably," I admitted. She smiled, linking her arm through mine. "Good. I'd be worried if you didn't." After the ceremony, as we gathered for photos, Ethan arrived late, rushing over with a hurried apology and a huge bouquet for Lily. As my 3 children stood together, laughing and teasing each other, I felt Daniel's arm slip around my waist. "We did okay," he murmured. I nodded, watching my children, these incredible adults who had once been tiny bobbies in my arms. "Yeah, we did." Later that night, with Lily celebrating with friends and Daniel asleep upstairs, I sat on the back porch with Emma, sharing a bottle of wine under the stars. "I've been thinking about the wedding," she said suddenly. "About how I treated you. Emma, that's in the past. I know, but I need to say this." She set down her glass. "I was so caught up in what I thought a perfect family should look like, Ryan's family, all reserved and proper, that I tried to make you into something you're not. And that was wrong of me." I smiled sadly. "We all make mistakes. But that's just it, Mom. Your emotions, your passion, they're not mistakes. They're what make you, you. And that's the mother I needed, even when I thought I didn't." She looked down, swirling the wine in her glass. "Ryan's parents barely speak to each other now. Did you know that? All that perfect composure was just hiding how empty their relationship is." I hadn't known, but I wasn't entirely surprised. Every family has its struggles. Yeah, but not every family has a mom who cares enough to fight for them, to feel everything so deeply. She reached for my hand. "I'm sorry I ever made you feel like that was something to be ashamed of." I squeezed her hand, my heart full. "Thank you for saying that." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, until Emma spoke again, her voice thoughtful. So, counseling, huh? That's a big change from physical therapy. Life is a big change, I replied. And it's never too late to become who you might have been. George Eliot, she identified the quote with a smile. You used to read that to me when I was little. You remember. I remember a lot more than you think, Mom. As we talked into the night, sharing memories and hopes for the future, I realized something important. The dreams I had given up at 23 hadn't disappeared, they had transformed. The path I had taken, with all its sacrifices and heartaches, had led me exactly where I needed to be. Not to the life I had planned, but to the life I was meant to live. Epilogue. 5 years later, I sat in my small office, listening as a mother across from me poured out her heart. Her children were grown, her identity in crisis, her marriage strained from years of putting herself last. I just don't know who I am anymore, she confessed, tears streaming down her face. If I'm not their mother, then what am I? I handed her a tissue, feeling a deep resonance with her pain. You're still their mother, I told her gently, but you're also so much more. You always have been. After she left, I tidied my desk and prepared to head home. My diploma hung on the wall, Master of Arts in Counseling Psychology, alongside family photos spanning decades. Emma and Ryan with their new baby. Ethan in his baseball coach's uniform. Lily in her college graduation gown. Daniel and me on our 35th anniversary trip. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Mom, need advice on getting the baby to sleep. Call me. Love you. I smiled, gathering my things. There was a time when I thought the greatest sacrifice I had made was giving up my dreams for my children. Now, I understood that the real sacrifice would have been never discovering that dreams, like people, can grow and change and become something even more beautiful than we first imagined. As I locked my office door, I thought of all the women I had counseled over the years, women struggling with the same questions I had once faced. Who am I beyond my role as a mother? What happens when my children no longer need me? Where do I find purpose when the purpose that has defined me for decades suddenly shifts? The answers were different for each woman, just as they had been for me. But the journey was remarkably similar, a rediscovery of self, a reclaiming of dreams deferred but not forgotten. Outside, the spring air was sweet with new beginnings. I took a deep breath, grateful for the path that had led me here, the tears and triumphs, the losses and loves, the sacrifices that had shaped me into the woman I was still becoming. I had given up my dreams to raise my children, yes, but in their place, I had found new dreams, equally valuable, equally mine. And in the end, isn't that what life is about? Not holding tight to who we thought we would be, but embracing who we actually are, with all the unexpected detours and discoveries along the way. As I drove home to Daniel, to our quieter but no less meaningful life together, I felt a deep sense of peace. The journey hadn't been easy, and it certainly hadn't been what I expected. But it had been mine, every step of it, and for that, I was endlessly grateful. The thing about middle age is that it sneaks up on you. One moment, you're changing diapers and reading bedtime stories, and the next, you're helping your daughter figure out how to change diapers and read bedtime stories to her own child. Life has a way of circling back on itself, bringing you to familiar places with new perspectives. My granddaughter, Charlotte, had just turned 1 when Emma called me in tears. "Mom, I need to talk to you about something," she said, her voice tight with emotion. Something important. 20 minutes later, I was pulling into her driveway, my heart racing with worry. Emma met me at the door, Charlotte balanced on her hip, her eyes red-rimmed but determined. "Ryan's company is transferring him to London," she said without preamble. For at least 3 years, I felt the world tilt slightly beneath my feet. London, as in England. Yes, Emma nodded, bouncing Charlotte gently as she began to fuss. "They've offered him a significant promotion. It's a huge opportunity." We moved to the living room, where toys were scattered across the floor, evidence of a busy morning with a 1-year-old. As Emma settled Charlotte with some blocks, I tried to process what this meant. My daughter and granddaughter moving across an ocean. The family I had sacrificed so much to build, fragmenting across continents. "When would you go?" I asked, working to keep my voice steady. "That's what I wanted to talk to you about." Emma took a deep breath. "Ryan wants to accept. He's already excited about it. But I'm conflicted. Because of Charlotte. Partly, she admitted. But also because of my career. I've finally established myself at the gallery. Starting over in London would mean building my reputation from scratch in a completely different art scene. I watched my daughter's face, seeing the same internal struggle I had faced decades ago. The same impossible balancing act between family obligations and personal ambitions. "What do you want to do?" I asked. Emma looked surprised by the question. "What do you mean?" "I mean, setting aside Ryan's career and what's best for Charlotte for a moment. What do you want for yourself?" She blinked rapidly, fighting tears. "I don't know if I can separate those things. That's the problem." I moved to sit beside her on the couch, placing my hand over hers. "I know it seems that way, but your wants and needs matter too, Emma. They always have." Charlotte toddled over, pulling herself up on my knees. I lifted her into my lap, breathing in the sweet baby scent of her hair. "When I was your age," I said carefully, "I thought I had to choose between being a good mother and pursuing my own dreams. I thought it was an either or proposition." Emma wiped at her eyes. "And now I understand it's not that simple. The choices we make as mothers aren't just about sacrifice. They're about integration. About finding ways to honor all the parts of ourselves, even when it's messy and imperfect." My daughter looked at me with new eyes, as if seeing me clearly for the first time. "What would you have done differently?" if you could go back? It was a question I had asked myself many times over the years. What if I had found a way to continue my education while raising my children? What if I had insisted on maintaining some piece of my identity separate from motherhood? I wouldn't change having you and your siblings, I said firmly, but I would have been kinder to myself, less all or nothing in my thinking. I would have remembered that being your mother didn't mean I had to stop being Sarah. Emma was quiet for a long moment, absently stroking Charlotte's curls. Ryan suggested that I could stay here with Charlotte until the school year ends, then join him in London. He said he'd handle the move, get everything set up, but that would mean months apart. And your work at the gallery. My boss offered me a remote position, consulting on American artists for their international exhibitions. It's not ideal, but it's something. I nodded, thinking, what if there was a third option? Emma looked at me curiously. Like what? What if you went to London with Ryan for the initial transition, say, a month to get a feel for the city and help choose a place to live? Charlotte could stay with me and Daniel. Then you could come back and finish your current exhibition, work out the details of this remote position, and join Ryan in London on your own terms. The relief on Emma's face was immediate and profound. You'd do that. Take Charlotte for a whole month. I laughed, bouncing my granddaughter on my knee. Are you kidding? A whole month with this little dumpling. Daniel would take vacation time to help. Lily's between semesters and said she might come home for a while. We'd make it work. But your practice, your clients. I've built enough flexibility into my schedule to take some time off. And honestly, Emma, this is what family is for. To help each other navigate the hard parts. Charlotte reached up and patted my cheek with her tiny hand, as if emphasizing my point. Emma watched us, her expression softening. You're a good grandmother, she said softly. And you were a good mother too, even when I didn't appreciate it. I had my moments, I acknowledged with a smile. But so did you. Later that evening, as I recounted the conversation to Daniel, he nodded thoughtfully. You know what strikes me, he said. 20 years ago, you would have been devastated by the news that Emma was moving overseas. You would have seen it as some kind of personal failure. 20 years ago, I defined myself solely as a mother, I replied. My entire sense of self was wrapped up in being physically present for my children. And now, I thought about my practice, my clients, the book I was slowly writing on mothers in transition. I thought about the women's group I facilitated at the community center and the online courses I taught for parents of adult children. Now I understand that my relationship with my children isn't contingent on geography, I said. Love doesn't require proximity. It requires presence of a different kind. Daniel reached for my hand across the dinner table. You've come a long way, Sarah. We both have, I squeezed his fingers. Remember how we used to be. Ships passing in the night, barely talking except about the kids or the household. He winced slightly. Not my finest period as a husband, or mine as a wife, I acknowledged. We made our children the center of our universe for so long that we forgot how to be partners. The empty nest years had been a revelation for us both. Without the buffer of children and their constant needs, we had been forced to rediscover each other, or more accurately, to discover the people we had become during those busy parenting decades. It hadn't been easy. There had been hard conversations, counseling sessions, even a brief separation during which we both questioned whether we had any marriage left to salvage. But we had found our way back to each other, stronger for having confronted the cracks in our foundation. Daniel had retired from corporate life and started consulting part-time, giving him flexibility he'd never had before. I had built my counseling practice around my own schedule, allowing us to travel, to pursue hobbies, to simply be together without the constant pressure of children's activities and work deadlines. "Do you think Emma and Ryan will be okay?" Daniel asked. A transatlantic move is a big strain on a marriage. They'll face challenges, I said honestly, but they're starting from a more solid place than we did. They talk to each other. They know how to fight fair. And most importantly, they see each other as whole people, not just as mom and dad. Daniel nodded, a hint of regret in his eyes. That's something we had to learn the hard way. But we did learn it, I reminded him. Better late than never. The London adventure. A month later, I found myself in Emma's kitchen, learning the intricate choreography of Charlotte's daily routine. Emma and Ryan were leaving for London in the morning, and the air was thick with anticipation and anxiety. "She usually wakes up around 6, Emma was saying, handing me a meticulously detailed schedule. But sometimes she sleeps until 7 if she had a rough night. Nap time is at 1 for about 2 hours, but if she doesn't get enough sleep at night, you might need to put her down earlier." I bit back a smile. "Emma, honey, I've raised 3 children. I think I can handle 1 toddler's schedule." I know, she sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I'm just nervous. I've never been away from her for more than a weekend." "It's a big step," I acknowledged, "for both of you." Ryan entered the kitchen, carrying the last of their luggage. "Cars loaded. We should probably head to the airport in about an hour." Emma nodded, her face pale. "I need to finish going through the medicine cabinet with Mom. Charlotte's teething, and I want to make sure she knows which drops to use if her gums get sore." As Ryan and I exchanged knowing glances, Charlotte toddled into the kitchen, making a beeline for her mother's legs. Emma scooped her up, pressing her face into the little girl's neck, as if trying to memorize her scent. "Mama," Charlotte said, patting Emma's cheek. "Mama's sad." Emma pulled back, forcing a smile. "No, baby, Mama's not sad. Mama and Daddy are going on a trip, remember? And you're going to have so much fun with Grandma and Grandpa." Charlotte looked at me, then back at her mother, her little brow furrowed as she processed this information. Gamma House. That's right, I said, stepping closer. You're going to stay at Grandma's house, and we're going to bake cookies and go to the park and read lots of books. Charlotte seemed to consider this, then nodded solemnly. Cookies good. We all laughed, the tension in the room easing slightly. As Ryan took Charlotte to the living room to play, Emma turned to me, her eyes swimming with tears. Am I doing the right thing? She whispered, leaving her. The question struck me with its familiarity. How many times had I asked myself the same thing? When I dropped the twins at daycare for the first time, when I missed Lily's school play for a dentist appointment, when I chose to stay home instead of pursuing my degree. You're not leaving her, I said firmly. You're showing her that her mother is a whole person with dreams and needs of her own. That's a powerful lesson for a little girl to learn. Emma wiped at her eyes. I just keep thinking about all the things I might miss. What if she says a new word or learns something important and I'm not there to see it? Then I'll record it or call you or FaceTime so you can see it virtually, I promised. But Emma, listen to me. Being a good mother isn't about witnessing every single moment. It's about creating a foundation of love and security that allows your child to thrive, even when you're not physically present. You always know exactly what to say, Emma sighed, leaning against me. How did you get so wise? I laughed softly. Trial and error, lots and lots of error. The goodbye at the airport was predictably emotional. Charlotte clung to Emma, suddenly understanding that something significant was happening. There were tears and promises and last-minute instructions. But finally, Emma and Ryan disappeared through security, turning back one last time to wave before they were swallowed by the crowd. I stood holding Charlotte, who was whimpering softly into my shoulder. It's okay, sweet pea, I murmured. Mama and Daddy will be back before you know it. Gamma, she sniffled, her tiny fingers clutching my collar. Home now. Yes, darling, let's go home. The first few days were challenging. Charlotte was disoriented and clingy, waking up at night calling for her mother. Daniel and I took turns comforting her, establishing new routines in our home that incorporated elements of her familiar schedule. Slowly, she began to adjust, her natural resilience and curiosity taking over as she explored her temporary home. Lily arrived for a weekend visit, bringing fresh energy and excitement. She and Charlotte formed an immediate bond, with my youngest daughter delighting in the role of fun aunt. As I watched them together, I felt a deep sense of continuity. The generations of women in our family, supporting and loving each other across time and circumstance. One evening, during our daily video call with Emma, Charlotte babbled excitedly about her day, showing off a painting she had made and demonstrating how she could now jump with both feet. Emma's face on the screen was a mixture of joy and longing. She seems so happy, she said, after Charlotte had run off to play with Daniel. I was worried she'd be miserable without us. Children are remarkably adaptable, I said. Much more so than adults, usually. I'm learning that, Emma nodded. How are you holding up? Is she wearing you out? I smiled, thinking of the naps I'd started taking during Charlotte's afternoon rest time. The way my knees protested after hours of playing on the floor. I'm not as young as I used to be, but I'm managing. Daniel has been a huge help. He's a much more hands-on grandfather than he was a father, to be honest. I've noticed that, Emma said thoughtfully. He seems softer somehow, more patient. Retirement agrees with him. And I think he's trying to make up for some of what he missed with you kids. Emma was quiet for a moment. Mom, can I ask you something? Something personal. Of course. Do you ever resent Dad? For the way your lives turned out? For the fact that his career always came first? The question caught me off guard. I considered my answer carefully, aware that my daughter was navigating her own complex feelings about career and marriage. There were times when I did, I admitted, especially during those middle years when I felt invisible. But resentment is a corrosive emotion, Emma. It doesn't hurt the person you're angry with, it only hurts you. So you just let it go. Not exactly. I had to acknowledge it, work through it. Your father and I had some very difficult conversations after you kids left home. We had to relearn how to talk to each other, how to be honest about our needs and disappointments. Emma bit her lip. Ryan and I have been having those conversations now, about balance and sacrifices, and who gets to pursue what, when. It's hard. The hardest, I agreed, but necessary. The alternative is to let the resentment build until it poisons everything. I don't want that, Emma said firmly. I don't want to wake up 20 years from now and realize I've lost myself in being Ryan's wife or Charlotte's mother. I felt a surge of pride in my daughter's self-awareness. You won't. You're already asking the right questions, setting the right boundaries. That's more than I managed at your age. I learned from watching you, she said simply. Both what to do and what not to do. After we hung up, I sat for a while, reflecting on Emma's words. There was truth in them. Our children learn from our examples, from our successes, and our failures alike. Perhaps that was the most important legacy I had given my children, the ability to learn from my journey, to take what was valuable and leave behind what wasn't. The month with Charlotte passed more quickly than I had anticipated. Daily video calls with Emma and Ryan became a ritual we all looked forward to. Charlotte adjusted to her temporary home, forming special bonds with both me and Daniel. We established our own routines and traditions, pancakes on Sunday mornings, afternoon walks to the duck pond, bedtime stories in the rocking chair that had once soothed my own children. Daniel surprised me with his enthusiasm for grandfather duty. The man who had once been too busy to attend school concerts now spent hours on the floor building block towers and making Play-Doh animals. He took Charlotte to the park every morning, returning with stories of her adventures on the slide and swings. She's fearless, he told me one day, watching Charlotte climb the jungle gym, just like her mother at that age. I smiled, remembering Emma's determination, her early independence. She gets that from both sides. Ryan's no shrinking violet either. Do you think they'll stay in London? Daniel asked. Beyond the 3 years, I mean. The question had been lurking in the back of my mind since Emma first shared their news. I don't know. I hope not, selfishly. But if they do, we'll adapt, Daniel finished. Maybe spend summers in England, or look into one of those house swap arrangements for extended visits. I looked at him in surprise. You've been thinking about this? He shrugged, a bit sheepish. I missed so much when our kids were growing up. I don't want to make the same mistake with Charlotte. His words warmed me, evidence of how much we had both grown and changed over the decades. The young couple who had once been overwhelmed by unexpected parenthood had evolved into these older, wiser versions of ourselves, still learning, still adjusting, still finding new ways to love our family across the shifting landscapes of time and distance. The day Emma and Ryan returned was a whirlwind of emotion. Charlotte's excitement was contagious as she ran to her parents, shrieking with joy. There were tears and hugs and exclamations over how much she seemed to have grown in just a month. Later, after Charlotte had been put to bed in her own room for the first time in weeks, the 4 adults sat in Emma's living room, sharing stories of their respective adventures. London is amazing, Emma was saying, her eyes bright with excitement. The art scene is incredible, so much more diverse than I expected. And Ryan's office is right in the heart of the city, with this view of the Thames that's just unreal. We found a flat in Kensington, Ryan added. It's small, but it has this lovely little garden that Charlotte will love. And it's close to some really nice parks. I watched my daughter's face, nodding the new confidence in her expression. The way she and Ryan leaned toward each other as they spoke, their movements synchronized in the subtle dance of a couple who had faced a challenge together and emerged stronger. So you've decided to go, I said, stating what was already obvious. Emma nodded, reaching for my hand. We have, but we're doing it our way. Ryan's negotiated a flexible schedule so he can be home with Charlotte 3 days a week. And I'll be working remotely at first, but there's a gallery in Notting Hill that's interested in bringing me on part-time once we're settled. It sounds like you figured out a good balance, I said, genuinely impressed by their thoughtfulness. We're trying, Emma replied. And Mom, thank you for everything, taking Charlotte, supporting us, but mostly for helping me see that I don't have to choose between being a good mother and having a life of my own. I felt my throat tighten with emotion. That's all I ever wanted for you, sweetheart, to have choices I didn't think I had. As Daniel and I drove home later that night, our house feeling strangely quiet after a month of toddler energy, I found myself reflecting on the circular nature of life and love. The sacrifices I had made as a young mother had shaped me, yes, but they hadn't diminished me. They had prepared me for this moment, for the wisdom to guide my daughter through her own journey of motherhood, for the strength to support her choices, for the joy of seeing her forge her own path with courage and clarity. You know, Daniel said, breaking the companionable silence, I'm proud of us. For babysitting our granddaughter, I asked, amused. For everything. For the family we built. For finding our way back to each other when it would have been easier to drift apart. For becoming people our children can turn to when they need wisdom, not just practical help. I reached for his hand, threading my fingers through his. I'm proud of us too. The dreams I had deferred in my youth had not disappeared. They had transformed, becoming something richer and more complex than I could have imagined at 23. And in helping my daughter navigate her own balance of dreams and duties, I had come full circle, healing old wounds and creating new possibilities that would ripple through generations to come. That, I realized, was the true legacy of a life well lived. Not the absence of sacrifice, but the wisdom to make those sacrifices matter. Not the avoidance of pain, but the courage to use that pain to grow. Not the perfect adherence to some predetermined plan, but the flexibility to embrace the unexpected turns that ultimately lead us home to ourselves, to each other, to the truth of who we are and who we might yet become.